Well, welcome. Today, Lauren and Christina and I are having a little bit of a special session because tomorrow, the 20th of January, is the Rave in human design. So we're going to be talking about how that impacts our lives, along with the normal two sun transits that we normally talk about, which this time will be 41 and 19. And Christine, I think, is going to start with talking a little bit, telling us what the rave is about, so that we know where we stand here.
Yeah, thanks, Lois. So happy Rave New Year. We're not quite there, but we will be. And it falls every year depending on where and when the sun enters gate 41 in the human design mandala. Because gate 41, which we'll be talking about more deeply, one of the aspects of this energy is its genetic component is that in our genetic makeup, gate 41 maps to the gene that is the only start codon in our system, right? So anytime something is happening in our genetic sequencing and changing, this gate, this energy is part of it. And so it starts this process, it starts processes in our genetic makeup, and it also is starting the process of this new yearly cycle. And so I think what's interesting about the Rave New Year is it doesn't map exactly, of course, to the 1st of January, which is when lots of people think of as the start of the new cycle, right? This new year, 2026 for this year. And often people make resolutions and intentions and all those things. And honestly, right about now, mostly those things have fallen flat, right? Mostly we've stopped. And so I just think it's an interesting thing to play around with. If you did start out a couple weeks ago with all these great ideas about how you were going to improve your life and your days, and you're not actually feeling the energy to follow through with those, now actually may be a time to try again, right? Try to recommit to those things that you were working on, because this is actually energetically much more aligned to start new habits, new behaviors, new intentions. So yeah, happy Rave New Year.
We get to celebrate all over again.
Yes, exactly. Um, And so, yeah, so the sun will enter gate 41 January 20th, 21st right now. It's a little it depends on which ephemeris you look at. It tells you different things. It depends on whether you're in Europe and the timing. And it's been a little bit of a bane of my existence trying to actually figure out the exact start. But it doesn't matter. The energy is going to obviously it's going to flow, this starting energy is already you're probably already feeling it, right? And so the 21st is what I'm holding as the first day of the sun in gate 41. And gate 41 it's a fuel energy, right? So this is another component of it. 41 it lives in our root system, in our root center in the body graph, and it is fueling the emotional process for humans. This is very much the gate of um feeling, right? It's the fuel for all human feeling, essentially. And so there is a lot of emotion involved with this energy as well, right? And so I think that this is another thing that can be really useful in our own process of like, what is it we are feeling like we want to start, right? Especially since half of the humanity is emotionally defined. Like our emotions are really useful bits of information for us, right? And so using those internal bits of wisdom can really be helpful. So gate 41 it's called the gate of decrease and contraction. In human design, it's contraction, and the I Ching is decrease, which doesn't neither sound exactly like particularly starting oriented energies. And it's taken me a while to kind of really understand why decrease, why contraction, and essentially I've come to what I've come to think of it as is this energy, and Lauren, you'll recognize this. It's the energy we use when we have a garden and at the end of the season we cut things back, or we have trees that we prune, right? Like it's kind of this energy of like simplifying, taking things back to, taking the unessential away and allowing what's essential more space to grow, actually, right? And so decrease and contraction are really kind of necessary components to kind of starting fresh in a really positive way. So that's a little bit about 41. Does that bring up anything for either of you?
Well, it's interesting that you use the gardening metaphor, but it's like in coaching, there's this, you have to get rid of some things to make room for the new. And so there's like the deciding what's working, what's not working. And the things that aren't working, uh, they sort of need to be swept away, which makes me think about my yoga instructor talking about like the samskaras, all of the things that we hold, and that you need to get the dustbin out every once in a while and clean that out so that there's room, for the new things to start shining in your life. But this like the idea of um, getting rid of things scares a lot of people. It's like if I've got to let go of things, um, and then I mean, because those are things that I might, to be depending on to make me feel comfortable in the world. And so I guess I can see why it's scary.
I love the analogy of the pruning. And what is absolutely in alignment and appropriate is this is exactly the season we're pruning. This is exactly when all fruit orchards are needed to be cut back because you need to prune before the sap begins flowing. So you want to cut what is no longer serving, you want to shape, you want to take off um, branches that aren't going to bear fruit. So, thinking about this applies so directly to our lives. And Lois, you are so right. There isn't anyone that goes out with clippers to prune that doesn't have a little apprehension, like, oh, do I really want to cut this tree back that just, I've been trying to get to grow? And I think we feel that way in our life, like, oh, but I put all this energy into that group or this project, even though it might not be serving us anymore, even if it might not be serving the greater good, we have a fear around that. And I think before we begin, before we start, this is a very appropriate energy. And there's, okay, pare down. Just like when you're going on a trip, you don't take your whole house with you. You pare down to exactly what, unless you're Christine and you have a car that you're going on a trip with, you might. But if you're going in a suitcase, you're going to pare down and you're not going to take extra. And if you did, you'll find out when they weigh your luggage, right? And then you've got to pare down further. So I think we've got some great metaphors here for you. If you're having difficulty grasping the energy of this great gate, pick one of those and explore it.
It's an interesting exercise to do in life too, because like when you pare down, you start to see what really matters to you. It's like there's been a couple of times where like we've moved, and in the process of that move, we'd have to have had to live in very small quarters. And I actually realized I enjoyed that simplicity and not having all of the stuff and the things to deal with and look after. And it was a huge education in terms of what really, really mattered. So even if it's uncomfortable and it feels weird, is just that practicing it again and again in different ways, you start to get more comfortable with it. So baby steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think this is really interesting. Like this year in particular is really interesting. Like this energy that we're talking about, we have right now in spades. So gate 41, the sun will be in gate 41. This year, Mercury is usually really close to the sun. It's very often these gates are very close together, but Mercury is there, Venus is passing through, and Mars will also be passing through 41 very closely to this time right now. And even more huge is the fact that Pluto is sitting in this gate for the next 2 years, right? And so there is a lot of energy here for us to start new things and to get rid of the stuff that isn't working for us. And I hope this really happens at the global level, right? Because all of us can look out and see how necessary it is for us to prune away and pull back and think differently, quite frankly, about what is important and what is not, right? And so this year in particular, I think is going to be really powerful. And also it is this is the last time that the sun will enter gate 41 in the global cycle of the cross of planning, right? In 2027, a whole new cycle starts. And so this really is a pretty pivotally transformative time, I think, and allowing that, I think, as opposed to resisting it, which I think is often what our what our default setting is to anything change oriented. I think could be really lovely because there's change wants to happen. This is what I'm seeing with all this energy. Change wants to happen. You can resist it or you can allow it. This is kind of where I feel like we're all, at the moment.
Well, it's interesting in the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd talks about how like this energy isn't just our own personal emotional energy, it's the energy of everything that's come before us, which is that's a lot of energy to be holding. And so we can see why it would be uncomfortable for people. But then that sort of leads to the shadow in the Gene Keys, which is fantasy. And so that sort of stepping away and not really looking and sort of living in a fantasy world where, the future could be better, which is like, yes, that's an impetus for us to move and change. I mean, you think about all the things we've seen in science fiction over the years that all of a sudden becomes some sort of reality. As I remember watching something where there was a whole wall that was a TV set, and I went, oh, yeah, But now we've got what they call wallpaper TV, so uh, the fantasy's becoming reality. But as long as we stay in that fantasy world and addicted to the fantasy, um, that energy doesn't get to move. It's just all in our heads, and we're playing with it. And so that ability to step back and be with the discomfort of, yes, things are really changing, and I need to be part of it, rather than going to a movie and watching things blow up.
I think that lower density energy of fantasy that you're talking about, Lois, is exactly where we stay because of our fear. Mm-hmm. And it takes courage to step out of that and to step into reality. It takes courage to be aware and to think for yourself. When we began this a year ago, the fact that 41 was a fuel gate really was what caught my attention. And I thought, great, it needs black currant then, because black currant is the fuel Gemmo. Now, a year wiser, possibly, and coming into matching these, I would say the fuel's already there. We don't need fuel. What is hindering to experiencing the fuel and the forward motion is our fear. And so when we look at fear, when we're looking at Gemmos, the very first Gemmo that addresses that is Black Poplar. And Black Poplar has some really interesting aspects to it. It's a pioneer tree, so it's the first on the horizon after a burn or after land has become degraded for any particular reason. It grows very tightly in community. It will thicket itself, so it sends up suckers and so it makes this thick community, and it also is one that we want to pay attention to because of this amazing root system that goes all out and about. So when we look at it in the Gemmo form, one of the things that it does is it shields you So you don't have to shield yourself with fantasy. It shields you so you can manifest without distraction. It offers cues of safety. It bolsters your confidence to strike out on your own, explore your own horizons, which we're going to be seeing plenty of opportunity for that in the coming gates, and establish yourself where others have dared not venture. But you can't do any of that if you're frozen in fear. So when we're talking about these Gemmos all through this cycle, it's important to understand we're talking about them in a microdose, and we're only looking at the extracts that work with either the central or autonomic nervous system. So these are ones anyone can take and add them to whatever protocol you're taking, or work with them all alone.
That sounds like it would provide a stability that would allow a person to be sort of with what their discomfort or their fear was, so that they could turn around and face it. And rather than staying in this fantasy that has us going back and forth between what happened in the past and what could happen in the future, is to be able to actually start to voice, which I guess relates to the polarity here. It just popped into my mind. So tell me if I'm wrong, Christine. But with 31 is that ability then to actually have more agency about it, to actually say what I want to do and put it out there in the world rather than just fantasize about it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. This 41 energy is the energy to dream, right? And so it's important to be able to have ideas and dreams for the future. You just can't get stuck in the dreaming and not the actuating of the dream, right? And so you're right, Lois, this gate 31 energy does have some of this manifestation energy. It is a throat energy in the human design system. It has leadership, it has influence, right? And so these two gates together can work to be like, cool, I have this great idea. How can I actually use it in the world in a way that, is influential, right? Or that leads me to a new place, right? This is a collective energy, the 41. And so there is an aspect of this whole like, how am I, and again, how am I interfacing with the whole collective? How can I share myself, my dreams, my visions with, the larger group? So very powerful, I think, when harnessed and done without fear. So Black Poplar, key. It's one of my favorites.
Want to keep taking the black poplar because it doesn't always land with people. It's so uncomfortable too.
I want to give a little testimonial really short for it, because about 2 weeks ago, there was enough in the world that could have done this to anyone, but I was struggling with dysregulation, and none of my normal Gemmo tools were working. And finally I went, oh, honey, just go back to Black Poplar. This is really fear, right? And within 3 days of taking it, I could articulate what it was that was causing the dysregulation. And anyone that has experienced anxiety, which I would like to meet the person that hasn't, you can't always pinpoint where it's coming from. You can't say, oh, it's because of this. It shows up and manifests before you even have the words for it. And I think Black Poplar is really good at helping provide the language, because we move out of that fear state and we have access to our prefrontal cortex to actually engage in language to explain what that fear is.
I love that. Well, and that would be good. So hopefully people are doing some Black Poplar. There's fears being tamped down, and fear of change, because 41 is going to want to change things. And then on January 27th, we walk into the sun moves into gate 19 in the mandala, which is the gate of wanting, which again, it's another one of those, human design names, and I'm like, what does this even mean? And I still really don't exactly understand why wanting, but the energy is the sensitivity, right? It's a sensitivity to, this is a tribal energy. It's a sensitivity to the needs of others, right? And so how it will be great for us to be in a regulated state, because I think a lot of this stuff is going to come through in this time, right? We're going to feel this it can also be, it can almost be like too sensitive, right? Like people that carry this energy can be too sensitive to the world, and it can be hard for them to know how to be boundaried around it, right? Because there is this real energy to provide for others, to do what needs to be done, to take responsibility, right? All of that stuff sits in this gate 19. Um, and and so I think about that just after all of this starting energy, that we've got these new things that maybe starting up, and then all of a sudden we kind of fall into this space of like, how is this affecting other people, right? How are other people's changes affecting me, right? Like, so I think about that this 20, January 27th to the end of the month and the 31st maybe being a bit more fraught. Maybe there was some excitement in the starting, and now we're like, this actually changes things. And what does that mean? And how am I being sensitive to other people's needs? And how are they being sensitive to my needs, right? Because the real shadow in this gate is not taking care of your own needs, right? So that is something to definitely be aware of, I think, in this time frame.
You know, it's interesting because in the Western world, we're very hung up on our independence. And this highlights the fact that by and large, we're still very codependent. You know, we're so sort of enmeshed with everyone around us that we're stopped by what might happen if somebody doesn't like it or it impacts somebody difficultly. And I think is to take a look at what it would mean to be more self-reliant here, because it's to actually be independent, because that's a growth, and it's an awkward place because it puts us by ourselves and we can feel very alone. Um, but it's a stepping stone, because we're looking like in that move from codependence to independence to interdependence. And it's interesting, in the codependence, it sort of holds the seed of the interdependence, because yes, we are interconnected, but in a healthier way than we are right now. So it's just something I think it bears consideration when we're thinking about what we're doing and how we're being affected or affecting other people.
I think often we take on so much more than we should. And this, what comes up for me while I was listening to both of you, is this topic we've talked about in other venues, is this caretaking versus caregiving. And the difference being, are you empowering the person, or are you keeping them stuck in their dependence on you? And I think every parent that's had teenage children, experiences the tug of that, and learning how to step back and just hold space for that individual to begin asking for what they need, rather than us assuming. And when we are in this highly sensitive state, this kicks in really. I want to take care of everyone. I want to make sure everyone's feeling okay, but that actually is an over responsibility. That isn't our job. Our job is to make sure we show up, and we show up in a regulated state, and from that alone is supporting others' emotional state.
Because this can actually make us sick. It's like, actually, my husband has 19 in his profile. And there have been times where there's things going on, like at work, where there's tension. And even though he's not involved in the tension himself, it sits in him. And it's really hard to watch. And say, it's not, in saying it's not yours doesn't really help a lot.
Sure.
Yeah. So finding ways to recognize, like you said, I think like you're bringing up the caretaking and caregiving, Lauren, is to really look at, am I doing the right thing for the other person here? Because like if I'm busy making sure that my child is safe and happy all the time, I'm going to stop them from some really important life lessons, that maybe where they're learning how to be with other people in the world. So maybe I have to watch them suffer a little bit, as hard as that is, so that they can grow.
And learn to advocate for themselves. Because that's what really empowerment is being able to come into the ability to ask for what you need and resource it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a place that we, again, like the conditioning of our world is not, it hasn't really conditioned us very well for, right? Like we often do not know what we need. We don't know what our own strengths are, right? We live in a very codependent, in general, a codependent world, right? Like we aren't actually strong in our own self. We aren't actually attending to what it is that we need. And if we had been conditioned differently, right, like these things would not show up for us so much. But this idea of like asking what others need, like that's conditioning, right? Like really we should be asking what we need, right? And if we all came in, knowing what we needed and being able to provide for our own needs, right? This codependence kind of goes away. We become interdependent then, right? We're like, cool, I'm showing up as me, you're showing up as you. We can meet and share the things that work for both of us. Cool. Right? So,
Yeah. All you need is to experience 1 minute of a dysfunctional group, and everyone's into everyone else's energy instead of containing it themselves.
So there's
it,
something, yeah, important about boundaries that's coming up as I listen to the two of you. Is it that is like, um, where are my boundaries? And but like moving from, yes, I want my boundaries open enough that I can have an open heart about what's going on. But and it also they need to be strong enough that I'm not being pushed around by all of that. So I remember starting to look at it as more like a semi-permeable membrane around myself. And so that what gets through and what doesn't get through. Um, there's some level of control over that. And that all stems from my comfort with myself. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from, if I'm comfortable with me,
Mm-hmm.
then that works a lot better.
and I can't control anything in the outside. I can only control my reaction to it, my response to it, right? And so all of those things. I mean, yes, we know all of these things. They're very hard to practice in reality.
Well, that's why we have Gemmos, Christine.
Yes.
They act as the bumper guards to remind us. And it's always one thing to know it here, but to know it at a cellular level, that's another thing. And I think that's probably my deep connection with Gemmos, is because that's where they're working. They're working on that deeper level, even when we're talking about the subtle body and using them in microdose. So dealing with exactly this energy, I don't know, what's mine, what's yours, and can I take care of everyone and let myself be completely depleted? This is oat. This has oat Gemmo all over it. That's exactly that energy. And oat itself as an herb, it's a very nurturing plant. Its roots nurture the earth that's in it and help bring up nutrients and help create wonderful colonies of bacteria, good bacteria. The other thing that's interesting about oat, though, is it has a similar action as walnut trees do, and it's not so friendly to have other things growing around it. So it protects its space. It has boundaries it puts up, and so it's like I can be nurturing and don't get too close. I want my space still, and I'm going to, protect my space, and, you take care of you, I'm going to take care of you, but I'm going to nurture all our terrain while I'm doing that. So I would definitely look to that. I think moving from black poplar into oak, really lovely combination. If you're feeling that you still have fear and you're looking for the groundedness of oak, putting the two together maybe for that period would also be interesting.
Well, that's true. And then that groundedness puts you in a really good situation to be able to sense what's happening.
Sure.
Right. You can sort of feel what's going on. And then that leads you to know what actually needs to happen. Like, what am I really being called to do here? Or what's the really best thing for this situation? So whether you're a parent or the leader of a company, that really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think more than usual, we've talked about in this two gate overview much more about new ways, right? Like how am I going to look at this in a new way? How am I going to be new and different here? Which I think is just interesting, right? Like this is the time. But I suspect that this is actually going to be a theme this whole year, right? Like I said, this is really the last of this bit of this global cycle. And I really feel like everybody is being pushed on to reevaluate and to really consider the opening up to different ways of being. And so I just think it's interesting that that theme comes through here, obviously. Um, and I just think it might be an interesting thing to track, right? And this is something that we've been talking about and doing in the Coherence Lab. We have this little, our little sun transit journal, right? And this is a place, this is a really perfect little amount of space to track these things. Like what new, yay, thanks, Lauren. It's not a lot of space. It's not like a traditional journal where it's pages and pages of space to fill up. It really is just like a note-taking tool to kind of keep track of the things that we've just been talking about, right? Like what has shown up for me that seems, in the light of Gate 41, like what seems new, or what did some new dream or fantasy or idea drop in this morning, right? And just note that for ourselves. I know that when I've not been as consistent as Lauren, but when I have done that in fairly consistent, a couple weeks at a time stretches, it is really interesting to note how whatever's going on in our brain and in our body does somehow seem to really correspond to the energies that the transit journal tells us might be alive in that moment. So I don't know if either of you have anything to add about that.
Well, I found it fascinating, and it's like there's some times where people around me are behaving differently than they normally do. And to be able to look at what the forces are that are going on and go, that's what's happening. That's, there's a certain channels have been connected, or the certain transit we're going through. And it's just like there's a reason they're behaving the way they're behaving. And sometimes it's for good and sometimes it's for ill, but it helps me to understand what's happening around me.
Yeah, I found it useful ahead of the transit time period and also during. And when I'm in my very fastidious state and on it, so to speak, I use Hilary Barrett's I Ching. And I will make a little note about each of the days in the transit, just a phrase that I might pull out of her book that strikes me in relationship to that. And I would have that in before the period even begins. And then sometimes I enjoy going in and just putting the things that meetings I might be having, or events that are going on. And because that's another lens, that's another way of looking. Why was that scheduled on that date? Isn't that interesting? And because I believe all this is connected. And how might this energy influence that particular conversation that might occur? And then make some notes about each day at the end of the day, or maybe the next morning, reflecting back. And the ahas for me have been incredible. It's been its own very special journey, all in my own little bubble. And also watching other, being able to see that in others, and then quickly look up, do they have that gate? I can see why that's, because I certainly, after a year of this, get it that we have a much more embodied experience when it's a gate that's in our design.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think for me, what has been helpful to me is since I'm trying to really learn deeply this human design system, that is the piece that's really been helpful to me, right? Like I can find these moments of clarity where I'm like, oh, that's what that energy feels like, right? So it's been really helpful to me to embody that in my own understanding. Again, it's just my experience with that energy, but it just makes so much more sense to me than just reading somebody else's description of it, right? Or at least it's another very useful layer. And so if anybody is really trying to dig into the gene keys or into the human design, I do think if this is actually a really useful practice in that regard as well.
When you were mentioning lenses, like looking at the I Ching, Lauren, is like as an integral coach, there I've seen where there's a connection between human design, the gene keys, and integral theory. And so, like in the development of consciousness of an individual or a community. And so, like, this is also like another lens to place in all of the other lenses that I use, like the Enneagram and that sort of thing, to help get, like, it's like pieces of a puzzle. And sort of like no one model is, got there's the complete, they're all partial. But as all of these come together, like you said, Christine, it's all sort of heading in the same direction by different pathways. So now you brought up the calendar. Maybe we should talk a little bit more about that in terms of where you can get it and how
Oh, I'm like, what else do we need to say? Oh, yeah, you
available.
can. It lives on my website right now, and so you can go to christineterrell.com. You'll see a human design header where all my little human design things are, and it's just a PDF download. It's fairly affordable. You can print it out page by page if you want from your own home computer printer, or you can just take it to a little print shop and get it printed out. I designed it to be in black and white, so it's not super expensive. Um, and so yeah, that's you can get it there, and I think it's a fairly easy to understand. We have a little bit of stuff in the front to try to help you understand what we were thinking when we put it together and how we use it, but that is not to limit you in how you choose to use it for sure.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
right. So we're celebrating the Rave New Year coming up, and looking forward to what's going to be new, what's going to be different, because apparently things are changing. And we might as well work with it rather than against it. So thank you for being with us, and we hope we'll see you next time.